Welcome to the World Language Essential Standards K-12 Dual and Heritage Language Program Showcase webinar. Today we're going to be talking about our dual and heritage language programs within our World Language Essential Standards, of course, and then hearing from two different districts about how they have established their programs, how they maintain them, and how they might expand them in the future for their entire K-12 sequence. Of course, all are welcome on this webinar, and we do encourage every school and district to have at least one representative to get this information. After this broadcast, these materials will be available for your use locally, and many of the things that I'm sharing with you are either on the slide or in the notes section of the slide for you to use. So today on our agenda, we'll start with a welcome and overview of our World Language Essential Standards and the K-12 Dual and Heritage Language programs within them. We will hear from Charlotte-Mecklenburg Schools and Durham Public Schools about their Dual and Heritage programs. And as I said, my name is Anne Marie Gunter, your World Languages Consultant. As we get to our district presenters, I will introduce them as well. And then we'll wrap up our webinar today with a few reminders for all world language educators and answer any remaining questions that we haven't already addressed. So to begin, I'd like to know what your goals are with today's webinar. Are you a teacher leader sharing information with colleagues? Are you an administrator gathering materials for local presentations? Are you an educator earning a contact hour for licensure renewal? Are you an individual getting a question answered? Or do you want to be anonymous on a Wednesday afternoon? We use the poll feature that is internal to GoToWebinar. So what I'm going to do is launch our question here. You can check all that apply to your goals for today, and then we'll share the results. So please go ahead and do that, and I will check the questions box. All right, we've got over half who voted. Let's take about 10 more seconds and close out our vote. Go ahead and get your vote in if you've not already. Remember, you can check more than one if you would like. It's up to you. All right, thank you for voting. I'm going to go ahead and close our poll, and then I can share the results with you so that you can see how everybody answered. Obviously, one of our main goals for over half of you here today is that you're an educator earning a contact hour for licensure renewal. And that is an important thing, and one of the reasons why we offer this World Language Webinar series, so that you have some options to earn a contact hour within our field. Contact hours to accumulate for a CEU for renewal can be earned by those who participate in the live broadcast of webinars in our World Language Webinar series. Today's webinar is 1 hour long, so 1 contact hour or 0.1 CEUs can be earned. Please save the email receipt you receive from the GoToWebinar system to document this contact hour towards a CEU for licensure renewal. This is a content activity for world languages, and I have set up the system so that you will get that email receipt and an attached certificate for today 2 hours after the broadcast officially ends. So please look for that email receipt and the attached certificate in your email box tomorrow. Also note, local LEAs or districts or charter schools must approve professional development offerings. So some of you may want to share those email receipts and certificates with the person who handles your licensure renewal. I also see that we have almost half, 44%, are saying that they're teacher leaders sharing information with colleagues. So one of the reasons we do this is so that you have materials to share in things like your PLC meetings or department meetings, or with others who maybe couldn't attend but are interested in this information. In addition, we have about 10 to 15% of you who said you're an administrator gathering materials for local presentations, or you're an individual getting a question answered. Excellent. And as you know, we will get to all questions today as soon as we can, and I will share out questions that seem to pertain to everyone. We also had a few people, 8%, who said they want to remain anonymous on a Wednesday afternoon, and we certainly understand that too. Please be aware that a recording is being made of today's webinar, and the archive, including these slides and any handouts we have, will be available for local training approximately 1 week from today. I do try to get things posted more quickly, but I can guarantee it in 1 week. These materials can be used as professional development resources locally, with contact hours documented by the district or school if you would like. All right, let's get started and talk about our World Language Essential Standards, and particularly the K-12 dual language immersion programs within dual and heritage languages. Dual language immersion programs are world language programs in which students are learning content like math or science or social studies in English, but also in the target language. And so we have a number of these programs across the state, in fact, a growing number, quite significantly. And the research shows that students in dual language immersion programs, first of all, develop high levels of proficiency in the target language and in English. And this is important to note because when we talk about, for example, literacy instruction and language arts instruction, students are studying those kinds of things in both languages. So they have a Spanish language arts class if Spanish is the target language for the dual language immersion program, as well as an English language arts class, although English language arts typically doesn't start until about 2nd grade. And almost all of our DLI programs begin in kindergarten with 1 cohort. But all students develop high levels of proficiency in both languages. Also, research shows that the academic performance of students in DLI programs is at or above grade level, especially when compared to their peers who are in traditional English-only programs. And students in DLI programs also demonstrate very positive cross-cultural attitudes and behaviors. So this is fairly significant for the kinds of things we want to achieve and have available for our global citizens of tomorrow, which are our students for today. In North Carolina, we have 4 models for dual language immersion or DLI. These models are based on the students' population that's being served within them. All of the models are focused on students becoming bilingual, biliterate, and bicultural, and they can vary in the amount of time in each language. But the models are, the first one is two-way. Two-way is where you have a mix of native speakers of English and native speakers of the target language, with approximately 50% from each group. So sometimes these programs are called 50-50 as well, although we have to be careful of that because that's more a description of the instructional time within any DLI program. So a two-way program has students who are being immersed, you could say, 2 different ways, either in English or in the target language. Content is delivered in the target language and in English. And it is similar to things like full immersion programs, although the way they differ is a full immersion program is made up of mostly native speakers of English, where the target language is used exclusively. So they're all being immersed in that target language, but they're also learning English. Partial immersion programs are those who, again, primarily serve native speakers of English in an environment where the target language is used for some portion of the day, approximately 50%. One thing to note about partial immersion is that sometimes it serves other populations of students because it's used a lot in secondary continuation models. When we have a DLI program at the elementary school, typically, whatever model they're using, the instructional time is almost entirely in English at the beginning. So they might describe it as 90-10, meaning it's 90% in the target language and 10% in English, or 80-20, or 70-30. And then as time goes on and students move up through the grade levels, by the time they reach 4th or 5th grade, generally, it's about a 50-50 or almost a partial immersion program because of that time frame. When students continue on at the middle school and high school level, oftentimes we see in secondary continuation for immersion a much lower amount of time. And so those are usually partial immersion programs, even if they're serving a population like a two-way group that has native speakers of English and native speakers of the target language. But that's fairly common in our secondary DLI programs. And I don't want to forget, of course, we also have developmental bilingual as a model. This is similar to full immersion, except that it's mostly native speakers of the target language, and they are learning English and maintaining their native or heritage language skills within the DLI program. So overall, like I said, these programs are growing across the state. We have over 170 DLI programs in North Carolina in 8 different languages. And the language is determined by the local community's needs and desires. We also have a growing number of students who are continuing on at the secondary level because, as you might imagine, if you start in kindergarten, then when you get to middle school and high school, you can continue to study your language in a variety of ways. One of the things that we have in our standards for all programs, including dual language immersion within dual and heritage language programs, is proficiency outcome expectations. This is where we want a student's proficiency in the target language to be by a certain time within the program. In dual language immersion programs, we have that set up to be at the end of each grade span. So here you have the chart that shows our proficiency outcomes based on the ACTFL scale, of course, that we use in our state standards. And what we're looking at is that by end of second grade, or the K-2 grade span, we have certain outcome expectations related to proficiency, mostly novice, mid to novice high. By the end of 5th grade, you see that those proficiency expectations are in the intermediate range. By the end of 8th grade, we're a little bit higher in the intermediate range, and then a high school program would get students, in this case with alphabetic languages, into the advanced levels of proficiency according to the ACTFL proficiency scale. I told you that we do dual language immersion programs in 8 different languages. 6 of those are alphabetic. You see them on the screen. Cherokee, French, German, Greek, Spanish, and Urdu DLI programs exist in North Carolina. One thing to note about all of our proficiency outcome expectations is that they are set to be challenging yet reasonable. We want to make sure that these proficiency outcomes are attainable, but also challenge our students a bit and challenge our teachers. They are adjusted by the type of language, like alphabetic versus logographic, as well as by the student's developmental level and by the time that students have, the instructional time within a classroom. So one of the reasons to have a range here, as you see in 5th grade, 8th grade, and 12th grade, is that despite what model is chosen because of the students you're serving, the instructional time changes across the program and can be very different from program to program in North Carolina. So you have these ranges that students should reach. These are alphabetic languages. On the next slide, we have those same proficiency outcomes, but now for logographic languages like Chinese and Japanese. One thing we know from research is that time in the language is directly related to proficiency attainment, but also depends to some degree on what language you're studying. So for native English-speaking students, for example, learning a logographic language like Chinese and Japanese, where you have symbols that represent meaning, as opposed to letters that represent words in the, using an alphabet, it takes a little bit longer for things like reading and writing skills, and so our outcomes are adjusted for that. So this chart for logographic languages looks a little bit different than the one for alphabetic, but that's how we've set them up to be. One resource for all of our dual language immersion, or DLI programs, is our new NC Dli Google Site. We used to have a wiki space, but now, of course, we have our new Google Sites, and all of the information and resources we had for our programs before are available on the Google Site. You see a screenshot of it there in the corner, and you can click on either link to go directly to it. I'm going to go ahead and click our bit.ly link to go out to our NC Dli site. I will go ahead too and put this link into the chat box. This will give you the opportunity to click over there with me or just to follow along on the screen if you would like. It's up to you. Notice that we have just a simple layout. We have a brief explanation of our programs, DLI in North Carolina. And then at the bottom of the landing page, we have lists of our programs. So in case you're curious about where those 170 programs are, we have those lists organized by district, by grade span, and by language. So you can pick the one that you want to find out about the most and the perspective you would like to have on that. We do publish these lists annually. So these are the 2018-19 lists, of course, and they are available each year. Generally, we have them posted by October of the school year once we've confirmed everything for the new year. We also have a number of other things. Notice that we have a standards tab up here at the top or there in the middle. You can click on standards. This has information about the standards used in our DLI programs. Of course, students who are learning language this way are using the standards for our state in all subject areas. So if you're a kindergartner, you're studying the same math standards and science standards as all the other kindergartners across the state. You may just be learning them in a language other than English. Notice we have links to our different sets of standards, including the standards for English learners, because sometimes we do have English learners in these programs, as you noted, who would be native speakers of the target language. And we have links to documents and materials that would be helpful to our DLI programs in relation to the standards. We also have a number of other resources, and I encourage you to explore this website. For example, if you click under resources in general, it's the DLI program directory for the state, and that's how our lists are compiled, but it has contact information for the DLI administrator as well as the principal of each school that has a program and their website. We also have the Thomas and Collier research and a number of other items available for DLI programs. We do have a professional development page, which includes a quarterly update webinar series, as well as the webinar broadcast we're doing today. So that's one resource for our programs, and I would encourage you, like I said, to explore that when you need to, if you want to know more about DLI programs. And going back to our slides, I'm going to continue on in now to our other type of program within dual and heritage languages, and that's our heritage language programs. These are secondary level programs. They're designed for students who have home or family backgrounds in a language other than English. We may also have students who come from other immersion experiences, formal or informal. One of the things we've learned over time with the increase in the number of DLI programs, for example, is that they often use these heritage language program courses as the language arts courses at the middle school level. But you may know heritage language courses more commonly as Spanish for Native Speakers courses, or SNS if we abbreviate with an acronym, native speaker courses, or even, like I said, the DLI Immersion Continuation or Target Language Arts courses. So they go by different names depending on how a district or school or program needs to structure their sequence for dual and heritage languages. The goals of a heritage language program are to maintain, of course, heritage language skills. That's very important. We want students to be bilingual and biliterate, and this is one way to ensure that they are. We also have the goal of developing or increasing literacy skills like reading and writing, as well as academic vocabulary for presentations. Many times, if you speak a language at home that's different than English, the communications you have with your family are directed at things besides learning academic content, and you may not have had the opportunity as a student to have reading or writing instruction in your home language. And so the heritage language programs is an opportunity for that. We also have these courses. There are 2 courses in the Heritage Language series that bridge into modern language courses at level 4 and then progress on to things like Advanced Placement or AP, International Baccalaureate or IB, and other advanced courses in alphabetic, logographic, and visual languages. On this next slide, you see that sequencing where we have 2 courses, and you see how that compares to a standard sequence from modern languages where you have native English speakers. So Spanish for Native Speakers 1 and Spanish for Native Speakers 2 are the equivalent of Spanish 1, 2, and 3 combined. Notice that Spanish for Native Speakers 1, or what we would call Heritage Language 1, is the equivalent basically of Spanish 1 and 2 together. That means that the Spanish for Native Speakers 2, or Heritage Language Level 2, is equivalent to a Level 3 course. Obviously, if you complete a Level 3 course, then you can move on to the Level 4 course, or as I noted before, other advanced courses in the language, depending on what your school offers and what you're interested in as a student. Notice that we have these proficiency outcome charts, just like we had for DLI programs for our heritage language courses, and that they focus a lot on building, as I said, reading and writing skills, as well as presentational speaking skills. On the next slide, I just switched over, is the proficiency outcomes and the sequencing for logographic languages as heritage language programs. And so you have Chinese as the example, and you see that it's the same kind of sequence, so that you have heritage language 1 and 2, and then you can bridge into a Level 4 course or whatever is most appropriate for you as a student. We do actually have these charts for heritage or for visual language like American Sign Language, but I'm still getting those posted on our website. The materials you're seeing on these slides come directly from our standards document, and in the notes portion of the slides, there's even references to which pages they come from and additional details about these outcome expectations and so forth. Another reason that we'd like to label these as heritage language courses is because it's a much more inclusive term, and it does encompass things like the fact that you might have had the language at home, or you might have studied abroad, or you might have been a student from a military family, or as I said, you might be a student coming from an immersion background, K-5 in particular, and going into the heritage language program sequence. Couple of things I want to share with you as resources for these programs. The first one is an updated item that you may already be familiar with. We do have administrator guides for each of our 3 different types of K-12 language programs. So our Dual and Heritage Language Program Administrator Guide you see pictured on the screen. It is also in the handouts section of our website, or of our webinar. So if you go to your control panel in the handouts, you'll see that there's a PDF version of this that you can download and look at. This gives an overview, including the structure of the program, structure of our World Language Essential Standards, or WLES, and the actual proficiency scale that we use in our state standards and nationally. This particular administrator guide also has characteristics of DLI and heritage language programs, the expectations and outcomes, and a feedback tool aligned to our North Carolina Educator Evaluation System, or NESA standards 1 through 5. This has been recently updated. And so you'll notice that this is a handout. It's not yet posted on the new website because we had to update things like links to the new website so that it would be ready to go and ready to share. In addition, another resource for our programs are the COCOs, or Clarifying Objectives by Course documents that you might have heard about. The COCO documents, or CO2s as they're called for their acronym, are actually posted on our NCDPI World Languages website. This website has links to them for all 18 languages, and I'd like to show you where those are at because I get a lot of questions about the COCOs documents. I'm going to use the bit.ly link to head on out to our website, and I will put that in the chat box so that you can go out to it too. This is our World Languages website. It uses the same templates as the other website we just looked at, the DLI website. Notice that under Resources, there's actually a link that says Clarifying Objectives by Course. If you click on that, it'll take you directly to the page for the Clarifying Objectives by Course Outcomes documents, or COCOs. And it gives a little explanation about what these are and how they can be used to develop a standards-based local curriculum in the language. And then, of course, you can click on the button for the language that you teach to go directly to that page and get your materials. I'm going to click on Spanish just to give you an example. When you go out to that, you have, again, information about what the COCOs or the CO2 documents are for Spanish. And then because we're K-12, you see that we have all of the elementary school courses for Spanish there. They have their course codes. And then you have a Google Drive that has all the documents you would use. These are set up so that only the standards and clarifying objectives based on the proficiency outcomes are on each document. You do also have the middle school courses, and again, the course codes. And then we get to the 2 things we're looking at. First of all, the K-8 DLI literacy courses for our DLI programs are there, again with our proficiency outcomes. And then if we scroll past high school courses, there's a special section just for heritage language programs. You'll notice that over on the left-hand side, you see that same sequence that we just saw on the slides, in this case for Spanish as the example for alphabetic languages. Up above, there's the level 1 alphabetic heritage language document and the level 2, so that you can get that as a teacher if you need it. And then there's an explanation of what heritage language programs are and how they operate, as well as the course codes for the heritage language courses for that language. So those are some resources for our dual and heritage language programs. Let's go ahead to our next poll question, and I'll check the question box. So this is one question where you can only pick one answer. You've got to decide which information about dual and heritage language programs was most interesting to you. Was it our K-12 Proficiency Outcomes, the program details, research, and goals we talked about, the resources such as the sequence chart or administrator guide, or resources like the COCO documents? And if you really can't decide, you can check other or more than one of the above to cover that. I'll go ahead and put that question out there and you can put your answers in. All right, let's go ahead and finish up our voting. Get your answers in, make your decision. Which information about dual and heritage language programs is most interesting to you? Just choose one. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close out our poll. And then I'm going to share that information. Very good. All right, it looks like many of you were interested in the program details, research, and goals. And as I noted, that information was also more explicitly described in the slides and, of course, is from our standards document itself. Some of you said, about 20% said that you were interested in the K-12 proficiency outcomes in the state standards. And those are very interesting, those charts. And as I said, they exist for all of our programs, not just dual and heritage language programs. Several of you also said you like the resources online, like the COCO's documents, and they're always available there for you. And as you saw, they're available in many languages because we want to make sure that we've got materials available for teachers across the spectrum, whatever they're teaching K-12. And then about 15% of you said that you're interested in more than one. Great. Thank you for answering that. I'm going to answer a few questions here. We've got a question that says, if a student takes Spanish 1 at one school, and then moves into a school that offers Heritage Spanish 1 and 2, can they take Heritage Spanish 1 as their second consecutive world language class? And I would say the answer depends probably on the student. Let's go back and take a look at the sequencing. There you see it on the screen on the left-hand side. Keep in mind that if a student has taken Spanish 1, they've already kind of taken part of Spanish for Native Speakers 1 or Heritage Level 1 because that's Level 1 and Level 2 combined for the modern sequence. So if you have a student who's taken Spanish 1 already, you might want to see if they're a better fit for Heritage Level 1 or, in fact, they should go into Heritage Level 2. Or they could be a candidate, depending on what you're offering there, for your Spanish 3 class, let's say, with native speakers of English. It all depends on what the student needs and what the school is offering. And I know that some of our speakers are going to talk about that and how they arrange their sequences for students with different backgrounds who need heritage language instruction in order to bridge into those advanced courses. All right. I do see one other question too. They said, is this program only for the U.S. or could it be applicable to other countries? What I'm sharing with you is used in a number of states across the country. We have this obviously in our state standards and have had for a number of years now, but I'm sure a program like a heritage language program or certainly dual language immersion, of course, exists in other countries and is structured in the way that best suits them. They likely have standards and so forth too. All right. Let's go on now and welcome our first guest speaker. Mara Kobe, the World Languages Curriculum Specialist at Charlotte-Mecklenburg Schools, is here to share with us today.
Good afternoon. Can you all hear me?
Yes, you're loud and clear. Go ahead.
Okay, just checking. So thank you for including me. And before I even get started, I looked to see who was on the webinar. And we have one of our original Spanish for Native Speakers teachers who's still teaching Spanish for Native Speakers. Ms. Nora Gomez-Saxon is on the call. And we also have Ms. Jeannie Starman, who was instrumental in creating the vision for some of the things I'll be talking about at South Mecklenburg High School. And then also Nicolette Grant, who was an amazing principal at Collinswood Language Academy and has moved on to other positions and most recently another district, is also here. So I'm glad to see that we're all here. So if we go to the next slide, Anne-Marie, and Nora was there for a good chunk of this. Spanish for native speakers was first offered originally at West Charlotte High School, and then it was involved at South Meck and Independence and several other high schools. But it's been around in our district for about 20 years. We currently offer it in middle school and high school, and we are in 17 middle schools and 16 high schools. And I will just make a note that 2 of those middle school programs are the continuation in grades 6 through 8 from our Spanish immersion programs. We also have variations on those Heritage Immersion 1 and 2 course codes, where at E.E. Waddell Language Academy, we use them in grades 6 through 8 and offer Heritage Immersion 1 parts A and B and Heritage Immersion 2 for Chinese, French, German, and Japanese at Waddell Language Academy. We did attempt in a couple of different locations to try to do French for native speakers. One time we did it at a middle school, and unfortunately the vision of the school was that the students were being pulled out of their French class for EOG review, and so the class fell apart. And one high school where it seemed promising, unfortunately the students were from Africa, the teacher was from Canada, and the books were from France, and somehow or another the dots did not connect as well as we had hoped they would for expectations, and so unfortunately the class also fell apart. We have not attempted it since, well, almost 10 years ago. So if we continue, here is what we have in our district. So we have at E.E. Waddell Language Academy, formerly Smith Academy, for those of you who've been around a while, we have full immersion in grades K through 5 with continuation in grades 6-8 in that building, and then we have 9-12 continuation at South Mecklenburg High School and North Mecklenburg High School, previously at West Mecklenburg High School. So we use the DLI literacy codes for Chinese, French, German, and Japanese in grades K through 5, and just a small note that we do not have any English instruction at all at Waddell in the French and German program until 3rd grade. Chinese and Japanese, because of the complex writing systems, there is a little bit of English instruction starting in kindergarten. And then as we move on into 6th through 8th grade, because we have 4 languages in one building, they are not able to continue in true immersion doing content in their target language in middle school. We just simply don't have the staffing or enough students to populate multiple classes of French, math, and Japanese science. So their language courses are those heritage language courses to sort of maintain their language until we can get them into the high school levels at South Meck or North Meck. So the other type of programs that we currently have 5 two-way immersion programs for Spanish in the district. 3 of them are only at K1, and the other 2 have been fully articulated K through 8 and continued through high school. As a matter of fact, our first cohort that continued in K through 8 just graduated last year from high school, so we've had those for a while. And so the programs are more of a 90-10 in kindergarten, and then in grades 1st through 8th, they have some sort of Spanish literacy all the way through, and math in Spanish all the way through. And then depending on which grade they're in, it will either be science or social studies in Spanish in grades 1 through 8. So we are using the DLI codes in K through 5. And then, of course, for middle school, that's where we switch over and we're using our Spanish for native speakers codes for the Spanish literacy in grades 6 through 8. And it was a conscious decision to do that. Part of it was budgetary. There were books on an adopted state list that we could use and purchase if we called it Spanish for native speakers. We obviously are not able to do that with the other Heritage Language 1 and 2 classes in the other languages. We'll talk about that briefly later. The other reason we decided that we wanted to continue with doing the Spanish for native speakers is that it was an established pathway in the district, and when we had the updated standards based on the proficiency levels and the proficiency expectations, those courses aligned pretty well. In the case of maybe listening comprehension, our students may be a little higher, depending on just depending on a number of factors, but it just seemed to be that the Spanish for native speakers was a perfect fit for grades 6 through 8 for our immersion continuation. All right, if we continue on the next slide, this is just a quick snapshot of what happens if they are at Collinswood or Oaklawn and have been in immersion since kindergarten. So in 6th grade, they'll do the Spanish for native speakers Part A and their math and social studies in Spanish. 8th grade, it moves on to Spanish for native speakers Part B, math and social studies also in Spanish. 8th grade, Spanish for native speakers 2. Note that in middle school, we can't officially call it honors or award any quality points, but if it were in a high school level, it would be the honors Spanish for native speakers too. And then, of course, in 8th grade, they're also continuing in math and social studies in Spanish, which means they've had a significant amount of time in the target language all the way through 8th grade. So they are usually ready for honors level 4, but you have to picture that there's a little bit of Swiss cheese going on. Some areas are very smooth, and some other topics or some fossilized errors might need to be polished away. And so we have also incorporated some additional companion courses to sort of fill in those holes and try to undo some of those fossilized errors. So the goal of that is that our students coming out of our immersion programs and the two-way programs are in AP Spanish language and culture in the 10th grade, and they take the AP exam, and they have historically done fairly well. The very first year, 83 out of 85 of those students all got a 4 or a 5. We also still want to have that companion class with them to still fill in some of those holes. That means in the 11th grade, they're able to take AP Spanish literature, and then they have other choices of electives and so on. If they continue at North Mecklenburg High School, North Mech is rather new to the game, and they are still trying to figure out if they're putting them through the IB sequence or detouring into AP and then pulling them into the IB sequence, since they are not able to test at the IB level until 12th grade. All right, so on the next slide, what do we do for curriculum resources? Again, I mentioned that the Spanish for native speakers was a very strategic choice to continue calling those courses Spanish for native speakers, because there was an official list of approved materials at the state level, which meant our district had the option to purchase those. So we don't rely entirely on those materials, but we do have them as a resource. We have developed thematic units that have specific language proficiency targets that are based on broken down I can statements with matching performance tasks and larger performance tasks and a common midterm and final exam. The common textbooks that we use the El Español para Nosotros. It was originally Glencoe. I think it's now Glencoe, McGraw-Hill, and 3 other letters all squished together. We also provide a common novel for the end of Spanish for Native Speakers 1, and Spanish for Native Speakers 2 has a different novel. And then there are some wonderful folklore books that we provide as well that can be a springboard to look at the various cultures where Spanish is spoken. For those heritage immersion courses at Waddell, we have sort of a skeleton of common thematic units across all 4 languages. They're similar to the native speakers units, but they're not identical based on feedback from those teachers of those 4 languages at Waddell. And then the school has curated and purchased specific resources to support each of those 4 language programs. And we are also planning for the opening of a sister program on the north half of the county, as well as moving to a new building both of which will happen simultaneously in August 2021. All right, and then you asked us to provide enrollment numbers. So currently we have 740 students at the middle school enrolled in Spanish for Native Speakers 1, and that includes the two groups of immersion continuation students. We have 800 students at the various high schools. And then the Spanish for Native Speakers 2, we have 114 eighth graders at our two immersion continuation schools in the middle school that are taking that course, as well as over 600 students at the various high schools. And then looking at what we're doing with our Heritage Immersion classes and our at Waddell, obviously, because we do parts A and B, you'll see that's why the numbers sort of look like they're twice as big as the Heritage Immersion 2, because we're looking at 6th and 7th grade in the first column and then the 8th grade numbers in the second column. And it seems like we're having less and less attrition. Our German numbers have always been strong. Chinese numbers are 3 times what they were from the first cohort. French has always been strong, and Japanese is, that's one of the biggest classes we've had. So I'm kind of excited about that. I think that's what I have for you. Is there anything that I've missed, Anne-Marie?
I don't think so. Let's go ahead and do your poll question, see if any questions come up in the question box. So from what Mara's just talked to you about, which information about Charlotte-Mecklenburg School's dual and heritage language programs was most interesting to you? So this is like before. Choose the thing that was most interesting. Was it the history of their programs, the K-12 pathways for two-way programs that incorporate Spanish for native speakers or heritage languages, the curriculum resources, or how they've expanded Spanish for native speakers or heritage language enrollment in middle schools? Or it may be more than one of the above, and you could hit other. I'll go ahead and launch that poll, and just like before, you can decide what was most helpful to you. It looks like to me you're getting a lot faster at voting in the polls, so please go ahead and finish that up, and then we'll close out this poll. All right, Mara. I've got a couple questions for you coming up in the questions box. I'm going to go ahead and close out our poll and share that so we can start looking at it. But the first question is, do you have Chinese dual language immersion program in the middle school?
So as I mentioned earlier, we have all 4 of those languages, French, German, Chinese, and Japanese, in a single building. So when they get to middle school, because of the limited number of staffing positions available, we are not able to offer any content courses in Chinese, French, German, or Japanese in grades 6 through 8, but we still are using the Heritage Immersion 1 and 2 language courses as immersion continuation for Chinese and the 3 other languages.
Great. We also have someone asking if it would be possible to see an overview of the thematic units that you use in Spanish for Native Speakers 1 and 2. Is that something you'd be willing to share?
Well, I actually don't technically own that. I have a colleague in my office who works with Global Studies, Study Abroad, and specifically supports our Spanish for Native Speakers programs. So I would need to connect with her. I think we'd be willing to share a snapshot. If somebody would want to email me, and then I can connect Michelle into the conversation.
All right. And one last question, and I think I can handle this one before we move on to our next speaker. They're asking, with the teachers that are teaching in dual language immersion, they have to teach all the subjects. So in North Carolina, as it is in many states, teachers must be certified or hold licenses in the subjects that they teach. So for example, if you're teaching in an elementary school, and you're responsible for the standards in the elementary curriculum, then you have to be a certified elementary teacher. When you're teaching a class like heritage language courses, then you have to be a certified teacher in that language. You may also have other training that goes with that. Our schools do a number of things when it comes to teachers in the immersion program. Obviously, our teachers who are teaching in the target language must be certified, let's say elementary teachers or math teachers or science teachers or whatever they are, but they also have to be have high enough proficiency in the language in order to teach those standards in the target language. Some of them are also duly certified in the language and could be, like say, Spanish teachers or Chinese teachers, but they certainly have to be certified in the content they teach and be able to teach it in the language that they're teaching it in. Also keep in mind that in a dual language immersion program, you often have subjects or days that are taught in English for the students, and that's where you get the idea of partner teachers. So again, a certified teacher in the content, but one who teaches in English because that's one of the languages that you're using in the DLI program. All right. So as you can see, many of you found a lot of things interesting about Mara's presentation. 40% of you said that you're interested in one or more of the above, and everyone had some interest in at least some of the things that Mara mentioned. So there's a lot to explore there. Let's go ahead and move on to our next speaker. I know we have some other questions, but we'll address those soon. With us today from Durham Public Schools, we have Melissa Perez, who's the K-12 World Languages Specialist.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon. You're loud and clear. Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, Anne-Marie, for inviting me to share this afternoon. As a district that is a bit smaller than Charlotte-Meck, we do have some of the same things, but definitely on a smaller scale. So if we could continue to the next slide. The Heritage Language program that we currently have is Spanish for Heritage Speakers. We do have levels 1 and 2. We do not have any other Heritage Speaker programs at this time in terms of other languages such as Japanese and German, as Mara mentioned earlier. Our curriculum resources, we do have thematic units for our Heritage Speakers programs for both levels 1 and 2 that provide proficiency targets, ICANN statements, performance tasks that are all aligned to the North Carolina World Language Essential Standards, and those have progressed quite nicely. We've been working on those and actually did a lot of work on those this past summer with a group of teachers, and I think that they are in the best shape that they have ever been currently. We do have a common textbook, Tu Mundo, Nuestro Mundo, which we don't rely solely on those. We do use those thematic units basically, and those textbooks we've had those because honestly it's been like 15 years since our district has purchased world language materials, so we do rely as a district as a whole for all of our language programs, like to rely heavily on the unit maps that we have created in the district. But they do use a lot of some of the readings and things from those texts are still valid. What we do have that's fairly new as a resource that I was able to encumber the funds for is called the Manual de Gramática y Ortografía para Hispanos, which all the teachers who teach in the Heritage Speaker program really love and enjoy. It targets specific things with grammar and spelling and stuff like that, whereas the thematic units, they touch on those things, but that really is like extra practice and help us reinforce. We also have some common novel sets for both levels 1 and level 2. Those are things like the trilogy by Francisco Jimenez, the Cajas de Cartón series, also like Casa en la Calle Mango, which is House on Mango Street, and there's several different novels depending on if there's like 3 novels in level 1, three novels in level 2, and then some additional folklore books as well that provide readings from different countries to provide that cultural aspect from all of the Spanish-speaking world. And if we could continue to the next slide, this is the same sequencing that Anne-Marie showed us earlier in terms of the regular Spanish program versus the Spanish for heritage speakers, levels 1 and 2. So the idea is that when the sequence for any heritage or native speaker would be to take level 1, move on to level 2, and then move into level 4, and then AP courses in Spanish. However, this year's the first year we do have one high school at Jordan High School where we have developed, and I'm sure Anne-Marie will probably remember this because I contacted her prior to make sure we were following all protocols and all things like that from the state, to create sort of a Spanish for heritage speakers 3. so that's a specialized program, and the idea behind that is sometimes, in particularly in Durham, our heritage speaker population, a lot of them come in, they speak Spanish in the home. They don't have a lot of that academic vocabulary, and even at the end of Spanish for Heritage Speakers 2, they would like to continue on, but they're not quite ready for that advanced level Spanish 4 or AP quite yet. So this is sort of a way to sort of bridge another step in between that. And we offer Spanish for Heritage Speakers 3 at Jordan, and I know we are specifically using that also for those students. It's kind of like for the profession, so like to help heritage speakers get ready for the professional world. So they learn things like, about jobs, and they do mock interviews and how to do a resume and how to do all sorts of sort of life skills like that embedded into the heritage speaker program to get ready as they start thinking about one day going into the workforce.
And I will say, Melissa, first of all, I do remember you contacting me about that. And it's one of the things that, given the local control nature of our state, really allows our districts a lot of flexibility, because they recognize the need that their students had within the sequence that they had established, and they thought very carefully about how they could address the needs that they were seeing in a way that would work well for the students going into the future. And so one thing to note about that in particular is that any world language class levels 3 through 8 can be taught using obviously the proficiency outcomes for the course as either a traditional, what we call language and literature world language course, or it can be taught, or the curriculum can be designed with those same proficiency outcomes to focus on a particular aspect or goal. So you heard Melissa talk about the fact that they set up that course so that it was aimed at things like career development for students. So again, they're still learning Spanish and building their proficiency to get to those proficiency outcomes for the course that they've chosen, but they're also doing it in a way that's sort of focused on a particular need the students have and that will benefit them in the future. And so we get courses like that, sort of career preparation courses or career readiness courses. We also get things like Spanish for medical professionals or Spanish for interpreters, where districts have decided to take one of the advanced level language courses and use the same proficiency outcomes, obviously, but aim it in writing the curriculum to address a particular need. It's one of the great things about the flexibility of our proficiency-based standards.
And I will say this level 3 course that we started this year has been very successful. I've actually been in that classroom a few times this year to observe and to actually talk to the students who are enrolled in the class and to see what they're doing and just get their feedback on it. And they really enjoy it and talk about how they're learning things that they know are going to help them get a job, and in things like doing those mock interviews and looking at, teaching them how to prepare. They'll pick a company, for example, something that they did, and like research the company and then prepare for an interview for that particular company. And something that they said that they feel like is going to be so beneficial and so helpful for them, and they don't know where they would have gained those skills anywhere else. So I'm really excited for them to be able to have this experience. And if we could move on to the next slide, I'll share with you a little bit about where we offer our heritage speaker programs. So the high schools and secondary schools are listed there. And then we have a few middle schools, but I'm particularly excited about the middle schools because I've got to tell you, I have been working really, really hard. Like, we've had for several years the option to take, for example, Spanish 1 in middle school, beginning in 7th grade, where you take 1A and then 8th grade 1B. But we have a really, really high Hispanic population in Durham Public Schools. And, it's taken me really talking to the principals every chance I get, and really just putting it out there about how, we need to offer this same opportunity for our heritage speakers as well. And it's growing. This year, brand new, Lucas Middle School added it for this is the first year that they have done it. Last year was the first year for Brogden, as well as Lowe's Grove, and Gibbons has been doing it a couple years as well, but are offering the opportunity to take Spanish for Heritage Speakers 1, and again dividing it in 1A and 1B over 7th and 8th grade. And there are even a couple of spots where there hasn't been enough interest, you know, in the student to want to take it in middle school for high school credit, but there wasn't interest in having a class, you know, particularly geared for heritage speakers. So we're doing what we call like a heritage speaker exploratory. So it's not a year-long class, but it's a semester class. And while they don't, you know, they can't get through all of the Spanish for heritage speaker, you know, units, they do some of that same work. So they're still working on their proficiency, even though they're not going to receive high school credit for it. So I'm super excited about that, super excited to offer it in middle schools, hope to continue to grow that. And if you look at the high school list, you'll notice that I have Hillside High School in blue font. And the reason for that is a couple of years ago, Hillside is a comprehensive high school, meaning one of our larger high schools. And Hillside has been the only comprehensive high school in our district that did not offer the Spanish for Heritage Speaker program, while they definitely have more than the population to be able to do so. And a couple of years ago, I sat down quite a bit of my summer with Hillside, and they were going to offer it for the first time, and they even had schedules set out, and it just kind of fell through. So this year, as in right now, the second semester of the 18-19 school year, we have students enrolled for the very first time and taking classes in Spanish for Heritage Speakers. So very excited that we finally got Hillside, our last comprehensive high school, on board and having a Heritage Speaker program. At the bottom of my list is DPLC, which is Durham Performance Learning Center, is what that stands for. And the reason that one got a star and highlighted is we have a really special program there for our heritage speakers. Here in our district, we have a very large number of students who have recently come into the country within like the last year or two, and really don't have enough of language to go into even an ESL program as a high school student and be successful yet in one of our regular high schools. So what we have done is created a very special program for them at DPLC, where they spend a year, their first year in Durham Public Schools, that they've just come into the country, the whole year there, where they offer some particular they have the Spanish for Heritage Speaker as a Spanish language, but they offer extra help in their core courses as well. So they have additional Spanish classes that is sort of like this own little like Spanish immersion thing there for them to help them gradually release themselves into a regular high school in the following year. So that's a really interesting program, a new program that we're doing this year, and so far looks to be proving quite successful for those students. And if we can go on to the next slide, we have one dual language immersion school here, and it is Southwest Elementary. And in order to attend that school, of course, there's an application process. And I have outlined for you how the immersion looks within each grade level. So beginning in kindergarten, you have a 90-10 model where it's 90% target language, Spanish, and 10% English. And then as you move through each grade level until you get to fourth grade, it sort of tapers off at 50-50, as well as fifth grade is 50-50 as to how much time they spend in Spanish versus English. But I do have some exciting news about our dual language immersion here in Durham. So Southwest has been the only immersion school that we've had for years. And this is like brand new news that like nobody really even knows about yet. So I'm just kind of sharing it on the down low with you guys. We have plans in the works for next year offering or making 2 to 3 more dual language immersion schools here in Durham. So I can't even begin to tell you how ecstatic I am about that. So we're in the works on that, and I'll have more details about that later. But I did want to share that exciting bit of news with you guys. And if we can move to the next slide really quickly. This is a breakdown of the enrollment. Spanish for Heritage Speaker 1, we have 271 students. Again, that's middle and high school, and I broke that down to the left there. In middle school, we have 63, and in high school, 208. In Spanish for Heritage Speakers 2, we have 102 students, and Spanish for Heritage Speakers 3 at that one particular school at Jordan High School that I mentioned that we started offering this year, we have 16 currently enrolled, and then in the dual language immersion at Southwest, we have 632 students. And if we can move to the last part is the poll question. I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone has, if they have any.
Great. And just like last time, I'm going to go ahead and launch that poll question. So which information about Durham Public Schools Heritage Language Programs is most interesting to you? Was it the curriculum resources, the sequencing, the background, the enrollment, or the information about dual language immersion? I'll go ahead and launch that and take a look at the question box to see what questions we have. All right, so Melissa, one person said, you're clearly passionate about creating more opportunities for heritage learners in your district, and that must take a lot of advocacy and hard work. What are your top tips for advocating to district decision makers and teachers to spread heritage courses to other schools in a district?
Well, I don't know about the top, but sort of what I've done is talk any and every time that I get a chance with any and everyone that could have any influence in that. So counselors, principals, assistant principals, any sort of administration, my supervisors, assistant superintendent. If I'm walking down the hall in the office and the superintendent passes me by and we happen to pass each other in the hallway, he always shakes my hand. And like anytime I can interject anything to anyone who could make a difference or could help me advocate, then I take that opportunity and I definitely run with it and do it and just try to put the word out there and always put research out there about did you know, because in Durham, one of our big focus areas right now is our test scores. I think it is across the board, those core test scores. Well, have you looked at the research about how dual language immersion students are usually above grade level than their peers and things like that, like bringing research into it and why this is so important. So that's sort of what I've done, and if anybody would even have more advice on that and more things I can do, I always welcome that as well.
Great, thank you. Looks like we've voted on our poll, so I'm going to go ahead and close that out and share the results with everyone as we've done before. As you can see, there's a lot of interest in what you shared about dual language immersion, as well as interest in the other things, your enrollment, the background of your programs, your curriculum resources, and your sequencing. So thank you both for sharing what you do in your district with dual and heritage language programs. I hope everyone online has gotten some good information they can use or some things to think about and consider how they can use going forward. I know we're a little bit over time. We will finish out today. Please know that we are recording this. You can always get the information later. And we will, again, like I said, try to answer all the questions we can today and do follow-ups as need be. All right, so let's close out our webinar for today. I have just a few reminders and resources before we finalize our questions and whatnot at the end. I always want to remind everyone that our recent professional development, like this broadcast and the materials from it, are available. Some of our most recent webinars had to do with measuring world language proficiency with credentialing, particularly with our state's Global Languages Endorsements, which is the seal of biliteracy. That broadcast was on December 5th. We also had a World Language Quarterly Update webinar on January 30th, and we had details about our North Carolina Advanced Placement or AP programs and partnerships. All of those materials are available on the webinar series information page that you see linked in the slide. That link is also available in the notes section of this slide, and there's even a link to our Global Languages Endorsement or GLE page for data about that opportunity for students. This is our 2018-19 World Language Webinar Series. As you see, I am crossing off the webinars as we go. So today's webinar, our Central Standards K-12 Program Showcase Series, is 2 out of the 3 in this series. Our next one will be on May 15th. We will be showcasing modern language programs, K-12 modern language programs. We also have 2 more from the Measuring World Language Proficiency Series, one at the beginning of April and one at the beginning of May. And our last DPI World Language Quarterly Update broadcast will be on April 24th. Just a quick note, though we always try to have 10 webinars in our World Language Webinar Series in order for those folks who are getting 1 contact hour for licensure renewal can collect 10 for 1 CEU across the year. We do occasionally have additional webinars, and I'm pleased to share with you today, even though it's not on the slide, we will have a webinar with our partners from the French Consulate in Atlanta soon, as well as perhaps some other partners going forward. Just a quick reminder for those of you who need to be reminded, FLANC, the Foreign Language Association of North Carolina, our state organization, has their annual fall conference coming up, as you can see on the screen. The call for proposals is March 1st for the deadline. So if you want to share what you do in your classroom or in your school, your district with your world language programs, now is the time to get those proposals in. It is an online application process for your proposal, and you can see that the focus this year, or the theme of the conference, is what's your piece of the puzzle, and it explores and shares how we integrate our other areas of expertise, such as technology, service learning, leadership, project-based learning, any of those kinds of things. There's lots of options for different types of sessions you can do, so check that out. In addition, I always like to remind everyone to subscribe to our Dpi Listserv. That's where you hear about information and news related to world language education, including information about things like these webinars, as well as other resources that you can use in your classroom. Finally, we're getting to the questions. I want to take a quick look. We have some general questions that I think would be good for everybody to hear the answers to, and then we have some individual questions. Couple things for Mara and Melissa. We've got several questions about sharing the list of resources you use, particularly for your DLI programs in Chinese, let's say, or DLI programs in Spanish or heritage language programs. Can you share the list of resources that your district or programs have decided to purchase for use in the classroom?
So, I mean, I'm happy to share like the list of books, like the novels that we purchased, and happy to share like the name of the textbook is in there that we use. Like I said, the version of it that we have is old, but as well as, you know, the manual for grammar. In terms of the thematic units, kind of as Mara said, I could be at liberty to share like a snapshot of it. I would not be able to share like the entire unit or even all of the units. But if that would be helpful to someone, I'm more than happy. If they would like to contact me via email, I'd be more than happy to be able to do that for them.
All right, that'd be great. And one thing we can do, because you are one of our guest speakers, is if you share that list with me, Melissa, I will post it as part of our webinar materials for this broadcast, and then anyone can have access to it, including folks who weren't even able to join us today.
Sure, I'd be happy to do so.
All right, great, thank you. And Mara, I think you already answered that question before, and again, we're happy to list things that you found useful in your program. I'm looking for another question. I see we've got a couple of folks asking again about the renewal hours, the contact hour. Keep in mind that once we close out our webinar today, you will get an email receipt. It's scheduled to go out 2 hours after the close of our webinar. So look for your email receipt for your attendance today, as well as the attached certificate from today, to be in your email box tomorrow morning. It will document 1 contact hour or 0.1 CEUs that you can collect, and you will need to check with your district or charter school about whether or not they will accept that as renewal credits for you. But that's something that you will have in hand to show your documentation. All right, we got a couple other questions I think that are individual, so we'll close out our webinar broadcast officially, and we'll get to those. This last slide, just a reminder of where things are located. So you see that our NCDPI World Languages website, you see the links there like you saw before. Note that I always post our materials minimally by 1 week after our broadcast, and they will be under the professional development section that's circled there. And there's even a special page just for our world language webinar series information, and that's where they'll be posted. So you'll have these slides, you'll have this recording, you'll have our handout, as well as the list of resources once Mara and Melissa provide those to me. All right, with that, I wish everyone a very lovely evening. I'm going to stop our recording.